Chapter 5, Children with Learning Disabilities. So federal law defines a learning disability as someone who has both of these factors listed here. Number one, the student does not achieve at the proper age level and ability level in one or more of the specific areas that are listed below, and they have a severe discrepancy between the achievement and intellectual ability in one of these following areas. So when it comes to learning, you have to have oral expression, be able to understand by listening, written expression, basic reading skills, reading comprehension, math calculation, and mathematics reasoning. And so when it comes to mathematics reasoning, think of problem solving. Sometime probably second grade, maybe as even early as first grade, students are giving math problems, and not just 1 plus 1 or working on a times table, but they're given problem solving questions. So, it could be something as Sally leaves her house at 10 and needs to arrive by 2. Which route will she need to take in order to get there the quickest, things of that nature. So the students have to read the problem, decipher what is relevant as far as and what is relevant to the question that's being asked at the end of the problem, and know how to take that information, put it into numbers possibly, because it may not be given to them numerically, and solve the problem. And in some cases, teachers don't want just, the number 12, or Sally needs to take 3 streets or whatever. Sometimes they want it as an explanation on why and how did they get to that particular answer. And so if a student has a severe discrepancy in any of these areas, as well as is not performing at the same age and ability level of his or her peers, then the student may need to be evaluated for a learning disability. Characteristics of learning disabilities, which I refer to as LDs, can affect the following cognitive processes: perception, the way they're seeing things, they're hearing things, maybe understanding the importance of things, attention span, their ability to focus, their memory. So this could be their working memory, which is something that is very, very common as a deficit in individuals with ADHD. They have challenges in their working memory, and the working memory is that immediate memory that you get when you're receiving information, whether it be new or old, but it's your ability to be able to retain it long enough in the working memory to link it to either past information or your own experiences, to tie that information together and to keep moving forward. Cognition is just your understanding, and then organization is self-explanatory, but not so much organization as in I have these folders for this and I have this notebook and this journal, but it's organizing your thoughts, being able to receive that information, organize it into your head to be able to come back and give an answer that best meets the needs of the question. So we're going to jump really quickly into a short TED Talk video, and I love TED Talks because once again you're getting this information from people who are in the field, who are experiencing whatever the topic is they are discussing. And they're going to talk, this young lady is going to talk about how that impacts academics. But before we jump into that, learning disabilities fall into these 3 areas. Reading, it may be more difficult for those who have learning disabilities in reading. Language arts, so different from reading because language arts includes spelling, written language, spoken language. So this is all the information that the student is sharing on behalf of their knowledge of what has been taught to them. And then you have mathematics, which is self-explanatory. So let's hear what Emily Carr has to say about learning for the learning disabled.
All of us have been to school, and I'm sure all of us have had a subject that we've struggled with. I believe this is because schools have created such a rigid structure, forcing learners of all kinds to learn in a very particular way. And this causes a problem. You see, this prevents students from learning to their fullest potential. However, I believe that art practices can be used as a gateway that allows these students, particularly those with learning disabilities, to demonstrate their knowledge to the best of their ability. For example, in sci-fi movies, real scientific theories are used to push a plot, and that can be a visual way of presenting relevant textual information a student is required to know. Another example of this would be science projects. So instead of asking a student to write an essay on how certain chemicals react to each other, they would instead create a homemade volcano, demonstrating this theory through a hands-on project. In fact, in many conventional education systems, teachers use project-based evaluation all the time. They ask students to do film projects, plays, storytelling, etc. And but these are just a few ways of combining creative and academic learning styles. This combination of evaluation is critical to those with learning disabilities. Consider a learner with dyslexia, for example. So instead of using text to evaluate whether they've learned, their academic growth could be evaluated through a painting, a project, a 3D model, and so many more. This method, or these methods rather, allow the student to communicate their ideas in a way that is clear to both the learner and the assessor. Graphics and text can be used in a variety of ways that combine traditional testing methods with non-traditional testing methods. And so when you put the two together, the student is able to use their project-based assessment to better communicate their ideas in their secondary form of assessment, which would be a traditional test-based evaluation. In our current schooling systems, standardized tests are a huge part of assessing the learning of a student. However, the real question is, how can these progressive ways of expressing understanding be incorporated into a standardized test scale? In fact, there are many schools that have started to implement this progressive way of testing. By giving students this option, teachers allow the students to create a learning record where various samples of their learning is documented over a long period of time rather than a short written test. This will result in students to be able to overcome their learning disabilities, since now their learning is placed and assessed on a scale that is comparable to that of a standardized test scale. Therefore, these students can now transition into a work environment with the same ease as those who excel in a traditional learning institution. Thank you.
So what did everyone think of some of the suggestions she gave? I mean, these were great accommodations slash different ways to differentiate instruction and assessment of the student's learning. So let's pause here, and I just want to hear your thoughts. Share a couple of things that, and when I say a couple, I mean, a couple of people, please feel free to jump in, turn off your mics, and turn on your video. And although you don't have to, but I encourage you to do so. And just share, just really briefly, how you have either used differentiated instruction or assessment and it has benefited the student. And feel free to share the things that you've tried that didn't work as well. Okay, so now we've had a chance to share out, and when it comes to teaching strategies for students with LD, with learning disability, it can happen in a variety of ways. And one of the more direct ways, or the more obvious ways, is direct instruction, which is what many of us are used to anyway. The teacher is giving the student the information directly from a book, directly from the board. It's not really differentiated. There may not even be other ways of even looking at the information. It's usually given in the format that is most comfortable for the teacher versus the student or a class as a whole. Strategy instruction, once again, like I've said before, a lot of the terms and phrases in special education are self-explanatory. This is another one. Strategy instruction, you're just focusing on a strategy. Whatever that strategy is, and you may be sitting just like this lady is right now with this young man, where she's focusing on something, and she's focusing what could be multiplication tables, it could be matching. I mean, it could be a variety of things. Maybe, the guy has to go in and select how many, all of the E's or the A's, or, whatever it is. It's focusing specifically on a strategy. You're trying to get that student who has a deficit in a strategy you're going to give them techniques and strategies that are going to help them improve it. And then you have special skills instructions. Once again, self-explanatory. You're going to focus on if it's study skills. So then when you're sitting with that student, all you're going to do is talk about different strategies that are related to studying, therefore improving their performance on assignments, or maybe it's just improving their ability to submit assignments on time. And then you have social skills. This is something that is coming up more and more, and not just in the world of autism, but also in, I would just say, in general, not even people who have disabilities. Uh, Maybe blame it on tech, too much screen time. I'm not really sure, but it seems as a whole people are struggling with social skills. And so sometimes students who have learning disabilities have to be taught how to engage properly in a conversation, how to enter a conversation, how to start a conversation, how to leave a conversation, how to leave a room. These are all things that um, people kind of pick up on either by observing others doing it. Usually the parents or whoever they live with first will be the first ones who will start to introduce these strategies and these skills when it comes to socialization. But once they get into the school system, even pre-K and preschool, kids will start to pick up on different kind of social cues. So sometimes individuals with disabilities, my kid included, it was hard to find a proper daycare or child care setting that would meet his needs and also not disturb the whole focus of whatever it is they were trying to do. So finding that proper child care place is great, because if a child has a disability, they get an opportunity to learn from their peers, and peer modeling is one of the top ways children learn. So when it comes to behavior, it is one that teachers should really take into consideration. Presentation techniques for direct instruction. They can be small group instruction. Sometimes if you have a really large classroom, or if you have students with disabilities in your classroom and your classroom has been deemed one of inclusion, you may have a paraprofessional who sits off to the side and can give small group instruction. Using response signals is very, very helpful. Sometimes it could be raise your hand if you've ever been to the beach, and then it gives the teacher an opportunity to see, everyone who has been to the beach. It also gives the teacher an opportunity to immediately notice those who haven't. So maybe she'll need to tailor her conversation differently, because everyone in her class hasn't been to the beach, and it may not be something that's worth explaining or tying into an example, because those who have never been wouldn't understand it. Also, using response signals also helps with anxiety of everyone, because if everyone's putting their hand up, sometimes people will just go along with the crowd. But at the same time, if they don't have to make such a big movement, it might be, put your fingers in front of your lips, and well, in this case, in front of your mask, and put up the number 1 if you've ever given a presentation before. Put up the number 2 if you've don't put up any numbers if you've never given one. So that way, no one is having to really make big motions just to be heard. Choral and unison responding, once again, self-explanatory. Everyone answers at the same time. We do this all the time. How many people have done this, or how many feel confident about the test, and you get a resounding yes or no, or you'll get a mixture of answers just thrown out there. But it encourages everyone to participate, because they're not just being singled out. Providing corrective feedback is very important for all children, not just those with learning disabilities, because you want them to feel safe enough to not only answer in front of their peers, but also answer you as their educator, as their child care provider. And if they give the wrong answer, the goal is to coach them into the correct answer, or to maybe take that moment to pinpoint or find out for them why they thought that was the answer. And then, of course, give them the answer, depending on the lesson and, what the goal is there. But then also make sure the student understands why their answer initially was the incorrect answer. And then, of course, the hope is they will choose the correct answer when it's time to be assessed. And then pacing is so important. In these programs, the ADC programs at Mission Valley, They are accelerated programs, so of course everyone is understanding they're just, basically off to the races, every 7 weeks, every 16 weeks, however it is, depending on your program. You might be in 5 week programs, 5 week courses. um, Pacing is everything. But in the, I would say, the traditional education setting, college setting, you would have 16 weeks. You may even have longer depending on the nature of the course, and everything is broken down. The same with people with learning disabilities. You have to take into account that they do have processing deficits somewhere. Before the student gets to your class, hopefully you had a chance to review the 504 plan or the IEP, so you have a better understanding of what their learning needs are, what their challenges are, and that way you can go back and look at your lesson plans and say, okay, I need to tweak this, or maybe not do that. I need to differentiate this and take everything into consideration. But the pacing is important because you never know um, what the student is completely understanding until you get to the point of either asking them directly, or Q&A part, or you're doing the unison responding. So you definitely want to take all of these things into consideration. We're going to watch a video on adapting classroom materials.
Today's lesson was a third grade lesson from Module 1. We engaged in a close read lesson using the text Waiting for a Biblioburro. Only book! Differentiation is really important to the students in my class. So as a critical thinker, I'm compelled to adjust the lessons to meet the needs of my students. Some ways I differentiate in the classroom are chunking text, adding sentence starters to support students with their writing. All students bring a different level of readiness to the tasks that they have to complete. So when I'm preparing to teach a lesson, I consider 3 things. 1, the data I have on my students. 2, my menu of options for differentiation. And 3, the structure of the lesson plan I have at hand. And then I take those 3 components and weave them together to design a differentiated lesson. First target says, when I start the whole group lesson, I start by unpacking the learning targets with students, reading the learning target aloud and making sure the students are clear on the vocabulary used in the target, and also giving the students some protocol to self-assess where they are in those targets. Show me where you feel you are on that target. Are you a 5, a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1? Great, hands down. Once I do that, then we work through the close read process. On a hill behind a tree, there's a house. We take it step by step. First, we close read for enjoyment. I just read the text out loud and ask the students to enjoy the story. So he took her book on his donkey to bring it to other kids. Isn't that cool? In your own seat sack, you'll find a little surprise from me. I disseminated the materials this morning prior to the lesson. My students have seat sacks behind their chairs, so I had tucked away the materials that I had differentiated for them. Disseminating the materials in this way allows for students not to feel singled out. In the next part of our lesson, I bring the students through annotating the text in the close read process. So in this particular case, the annotating or the text coding was the underlining of important information and circling unfamiliar words.
I underline libraries and books.
In order to have my classroom more student-centered, I balance teacher talk and student talk. And I chose after each work period to have them pair and share their work and make corrections that way. And I allow them to check in with each other or myself in regards to that work.
You're a good reader. Could you read it to them? And then after he's done reading it, could you give him a suggestion on what he should write
I
right there?
strategically paired the students on a similar reading level, but even though they're on a similar reading level, they brought a different subset of skills. I knew that one student may bring a wealth of vocabulary knowledge, while the other student brought the comprehension element. And by pairing them like this, they're able to reach a deeper understanding within the text. About half of the class is identified with special needs, and I have a co-teacher to provide additional support to small groups as needed. Another way I differentiate is chunking text. I may give one student 1 paragraph and another student 2. The students who receive 1 paragraph are able to feel like they can complete the process without feeling intimidated or frustrated, while those who feel more confident may get 2 paragraphs so they're able to complete the task and feel the challenge and not get bored during the lesson. Being aware of the pacing and the reading level that they're at, it's just giving students a different amount, but I'm not changing the complexity of the text. The great thing about the modules is that the lesson plans and student work and student text are already prepared. So my planning time is spent preparing the differentiated materials for the students, and I'm not spending my time preparing those other pieces that I used to spend my time preparing. Once we complete the annotation of the text with the circling and the underlining, we ask the students to do the third close read independently of their excerpt, and then after they do that, to mark the gist on the side of their excerpt that best matches their chunk of text.
Sean, how would you explain a gist in your own words?
What the text talks about a lot.
The gist is the first draft of thinking about the text. What's the text mostly about?
All right, we're on the fourth part of the close read, which is answering text-based questions.
Then I guide the students to take all of that work that they've put into the text, that deep learning, and apply it to answering text-based questions. I provide different recording forms. Some recording forms offer more support, including sentence starters, and some of the recording forms offer less support, and they are minus the sentence starters. So another way I was able to differentiate is instead of modeling for the whole class and taking away time when other kids are ready to move on, I made sure I set the class and then moved to the students who would need the extra examples, touched base with them first, and then was able to monitor the rest of the class.
Exit ticket. You need to pick one question and write the answer for me on this card.
So in this case, I wanted an exit ticket as my ending assessment instead of a whole group discussion. I find with whole group discussion, I'm not sure I heard from every student. And with an exit ticket, I do get a piece of work from every student. The differentiation done well is short term for the children, so that by the time they complete the academic year, they don't need the same differentiation and scaffolding that they did at the beginning. I absolutely see results. Kids have the supports during the lesson that they need to complete the work, regardless of their readiness.
So at night on her
Students who normally feel frustrated, intimidated, overwhelmed, or lack confidence are able to feel empowered, engaged, because they know that the support is there for them to be able to finish. We all have the same text, we all have the same target, but we achieve the target by different means. And that's what differentiation does for the students during the lesson. Provides a different pathway to get to the same target.
and they were happy because now they were reading and they can read more better.
Okay, so I believe she did a great job explaining and showing, how you can approach differentiated instruction in the classroom with students with varying needs. She talked about her lesson planning and how she was able to use that actual lesson planning time for actually differentiating her instruction because she was so organized in the very beginning. And I love the way she had all of the materials already there behind each student because students are constantly looking for something. They're arriving without pens, pencils, whatever it is that they need. There's guaranteed to be at least one throughout the week, if not many more, that walk in unprepared. And even now, doing everything online, I have nephews who talk about how they have classmates who, forget the connectivity issue for a second. It could just be they arrived and they forgot to upload something and now they don't have this and now they got to go there and then they're not familiar with sharing the screen. So there's all these things that impact the learning environment, and then when you have someone who has a learning disability, it just makes it more and more profound, possibly. And so to wrap up, LDs are based on significant impairments in one or more developmental areas around reading, writing, and math. It may impact the student's perception, their memory being their working memory, attention abilities, cognition, and/or organization. Differentiating instruction is a great way to approach accommodating a student with a learning disability, and differentiate practice and assessments to accommodate students' disability. So as the professor, as the instructor, the teacher, the child care provider, it's important for you to also feel comfortable in providing these accommodations, in differentiating instruction on the fly. I am able to do it with certain disabilities only because of all the experience I've had either with my son or working with them directly as a special education teacher in Florida. But that's the only reason why. But in the very beginning, I was just bumbling and the students could tell that I wasn't comfortable. And that concludes chapter 5.